Welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast.
Dan, welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. How are we doing?
We are great. It's so cool to be connected. And how can you not be happy with that kind of intro? That beat, man, is just amazing. Give me a recording of that. So like when I need to get up in the morning, I get my coffee and I play that intro. That's going to get me going in the morning.
Good man. I'll send it over by all means. I knew today was going to be a good one. So I think, Dan, I followed you for a long while now. Probably stalked you in really unhealthy ways. But yeah, I've been connected with you for a while. But I guess what I tend to do is I tend to ask my kind of guests to summarize themselves in one sentence, their log line. What would yours be?
One sentence, Danny, that's tough. I mean, if I took the professional angle, I would say that unlike a lot of designers who like the comfort of creative agencies and spaces, I'm a design pioneer who has loved bringing the human-centered, empathetic, creative forces of design into the heart of companies and industries that desperately need it, like banking and healthcare. And so I'm a little bit of a design pioneer is what I would say.
Nice. That's powerful. I like it. So I guess before we get into the show, I want to ask you a question, Dan. What's the one thing that's made you smile today?
What's made me smile? Well, your intro music, for one, it didn't just make me smile, it made me dance. I think the other thing is my dog, Astro. I've got a Samoyed who is a rescue, actually from the streets of China when my son was studying Chinese out there. And there's a puppy that was abandoned, and he's now in my care. And he is the most cuddly and loyal and affectionate force. And he and I had a great little walk today, and just his curiosity and his way, just that always brings me a good smile today.
Nice. I seen an image on, it might have been LinkedIn or Insta, and it was a picture of a guy and a dog sat on a fence, and it was like the reason why dogs and humans are different, and it had this image of the guy thinking about life and finances and whatever else, and then the little image of a dog was just him and the dog owner sat down on a bench. I was like, well, that's actually quite nice. It's just simple.
Yeah, present. It's great. It's really changed my life, actually. It's brought rhythm. It's brought kind of a new responsibility. I've also got 3 amazing kids. Oldest is 24, youngest is 19. And so much of my life has been defined by the nurturing force of fatherhood and being a parent. And when I became an empty nester within the last couple of years, somehow having this dog in my life has kind of rekindled in me that rhythm of nurturing and in a new way. So, clearly dogs and humans, a bit different there. My kids, if you're listening to this, I'm not comparing you to dogs, but he's been great. He's been a real good force of regularity and love and cuddling in my life.
Nice. Yeah. So I have a dog. He's 13 years old now. He's an old man now. And he recently got diagnosed with diabetes. So apparently older dogs can just get it overnight. And it's a real shame watching him get old and, and stuff kicks in. But the curiosity, the thing where we can just come over and give you a little nudge, it's just something nice about just breaking that state and being like, oh, yeah, work isn't as important as my family, my dog. It's nice. It's nice. So I'm going to ask you to pick a number between 1 and 12, okay, Dan? And what number is aligns to a list of questions. Now I'm going to ask you that question, but I don't want the answer until later on, okay? So pick a number between 1 and 12.
Got to go with 9.
9. Okay, nice. Okay, so the question, which I want the answer to a little bit later on, is, have you done anything lately worth remembering? Okay? So that's the question for you later on.
Great, love it.
But Dan, we just got straight into it, and I'm like, actually, people may not have come across you. They may not have come across the legend that is you. So maybe give my listeners some of the background of who you are and kind of where you've come from.
Yeah. So I currently live in England, but I was born in New England. I was actually hilariously born in a little town called New Britain, Connecticut. And I grew up in New England and ultimately ended up going to an international school on Vancouver Island in Canada and fell in love with the world because I had roommates from all over the place. And I took 2 gap years to travel and to do volunteer service in West Africa and the Czech Republic. It's just had an amazing time. And then when I finally settled down and realized what I wanted to do in this world, I actually studied international relations at Tufts University. I want to save the world. I wanted to go into the world of global development and foundations. The last thing I was going to ever do was design because my dad is a designer and he's had his own graphic design firm. And I love my dad. I don't really have any deep daddy issues, but when you're 18 and you just want to do your own thing. And then this thing happened. My dad actually gave me this book when I was at university called Information Architects. And it was a book by this design leader, Richard Saul Wurman. He's the founder of the TED conferences, and he was an architect who started realizing in this world of massive data, you needed the organizing skills of design to bring kind of architecture and meaning to massive amounts of data. And I loved that information architecture approach. And the other thing is I took a multimedia design class at Tufts University, and I learned about macro media and lingo scripting and interactive software. And so I ended up in the middle of my college career going really deep into this intersection of technology and design, so digital design, and ended up redesigning the traffic system for Boston, all the operators who were managing hundreds of video feeds of traffic, what are their interfaces for managing that? And, massive websites back when HTML was brand new, which ultimately led me to Microsoft and then Google and Motorola and Walmart. And then the last 5 years, chief design officer roles in banking and healthcare. And so I guess I'm a designer by career, but really my heart and soul is about making this world a better place. And I still have that global development, international relations spirit in the work that I do.
Nice. Wow. I mean, there's definitely a lot to kind of needle into there. And I'll get into the design stuff a little bit later on. But I guess if I was to take you right back to your childhood.
Yeah.
And I would say, let's pretend I could get into a little time machine, go all the way back and kind of go and ask your teacher, what's Dan going to be when he grows up? What would your teacher have said?
I mean, my teacher probably would have said he's going to be a disruptor, innovator of some sort. I mean, I was always a bit of a class clown and I had a lot of extroverted energy, and my teachers didn't always appreciate that. But also, my dad's a graphic designer, but my mom is an actress and she has a master's in drama and she's really comfortable on the stage. And I kind of grew up, going into local theater, and I was the lead of my high school musical. And so I think if you talk to my teachers, they probably would have said something between a disruptor and a performer. And I guess that's kind of what I've actually done in one roundabout way.
Nice. Yeah, there's definitely something there for sure. I guess, when I think about you, Dan, I think about curiosity, creativity, expression. And I think I see that, right? Like the videos when you was going through, I think you was doing dance for a while and just being expressed. It's like, where does that come from? Is that expression something you've learned to develop? Or is it something that's just naturally been there and you've been able to do it? Like, where does that come from?
I mean, I don't know. I think having 2 parents who are artists naturally has kind of, I've been raised in an environment where creativity and expression was the norm. Like I grew up without, my parents had no money as artists, right? So they built my furniture out of fiberboard and plywood but then we did have this creative room where my parents bought this thing called shower board. It's white and glossy on one side, and then it's water treated on the other side. You put this to line bathrooms, right? And it's really cheap, a couple bucks per sheet. And they lined this room with shower boards. And then we had these erasable markers. And so long before whiteboards were a thing of modern innovation and design thinking, I grew up with, these tools and these spaces to kind of create and to express and to, so I think that's a lot of it. I mean, the other part of it is I get really excited when I have the opportunity to do something new, to pioneer something that hasn't been done before. And given that whole international relations thing and the fact that I've lived in China and I've now, lived in Europe and I've, grew up in the US and went to school in Canada, like I really thoughtful about this thing called the planet. And I'm kind of conscious that we all are on this one rock and we're just trying to ultimately understand bit by bit, whether it's climate or whether it's connected financial systems or whatever, that we got to figure out and just realize that we are just this one big family on this one rock and our destinies are intertwined. And I like projects that allow me to push the boundaries of traditional thinking to think about our humanity and the things that connect us. Mm-hmm. So you asked earlier about like, how would people kind of know me? Well, in my 20s, I redesigned this thing called Hotmail. I don't know if you remember Hotmail, if you have a Hotmail account, but it's a little embarrassing these days to say you have a Hotmail account. Maybe not as embarrassing as an AOL account, but I took all of that multimedia software, training I had and brought those thoughts to what was really a static HTML-like experience, to something that was richer. And then later on at Microsoft, I was the part of the team that launched the first Surface. Remember there was a table that it was just objects and touch. And my team was in charge of interaction design. So how do you create the interface between people when you don't have a mouse, you don't have a keyboard, you don't have a traditional graphical user interface? And then later on, when I was at Motorola, got into hardware, and then at Google, we launched this thing called Hey Moto, which is the first time outside of Star Trek science fiction that a human could just naturally talk to a screen and it would respond. And two things happened. Within a couple months, Google took notes that was the most loved feature of the Moto X that we launched it on. And so they said, hey, we just want to make one change. Instead of Hey Moto, let's call that Hey Google. And we're like, okay, that's great. Like this thing is now going to, take off. Then, oh, sorry, my Google speakers are fun. And then the second thing that happened was 11 months later, Alexa came out. And a month after that, Hey Siri came out, right? And that was very natural for us to interact and speak to smart speakers. But that was something that we created. So anyway, whether it's working in tech or whether over the last 5 years, it's thinking about how do people connect to their health or how do people connect to money, right? These fundamental things that are so complicated and so difficult to understand and use, but so important for our financial and our physical health. What I've tried to do with design is be a bit of a rebel for good. So push the boundaries and try to bring that childlike, environment of creativity that my parents fostered, but now apply it to rethinking projects and company strategies that help us to advance as a civilization in healthy ways.
Nice. I guess there's something around that whole thing of you like the unknown, right? The new innovation, the art of what could be, and there tends to be no ceiling to that. But I guess it kind of starts getting me thinking about wonderment. Like there's clearly, like how important is wonderment too? Because for me, I find wonderment in
core.
But yes, go for it.
No, it's core. I mean, well, first of all, I think there's this really cool professor at Stanford University named Bob McKim. And Bob McKim was in the engineering group, so a very linear, left-brained kind of discipline. But he got really interested about this thing called creativity. He noticed some students would solve these really hardcore engineering problems in really unexpected ways using creative approaches. So he started studying it. And he used to do this experiment around creativity where he'd ask people to take out a sheet of paper and in 60 seconds, draw your neighbor, right? So they would kind of like, just draw their neighbor. And he would just kind of, that's you. You're welcome. Amazing. And whenever he did that with adults, the most signature response that he got was a lot of sorries, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of nervousness. And it's just a simple task, right? Mm-hmm. And then whenever he did that experiment with kids, he had a very different response. Kids, when they're asked to draw, they're not particularly excited or afraid. They just draw, right? Anyone who has kids or been around kids, if you put paper and crayons next to a kid, they're just going to draw. Sometimes they don't even need paper. They just need a white wall or just something to go. And he did that experiment to prove that as human beings, we have an innate sense of wonderment. We have an innate sense of expression and creativity. And that somehow in those middle school and high school years, we start to slowly fear the judgment of our peers, and we start to retract into this kind of aspect of adulthood that limits our thinking, that limits our wonderment. Like, how many times do you remember as a kid getting some gift in some box or something, but the box itself was the more interesting toy of wonderment that you could turn into a rocket ship or a time machine or anything you wanted, and you just didn't really play with the other thing? Like, my question, and the reason why I do hip hop dance class, is to remind me to always be a little out of my comfort zone, because that's what creativity is. Creativity and wonderment is the belief that the future can be better than the past or the moment now, that I am not defined but only by what I've been able to accomplish before, and that the world's most important problems in the future can be brighter and better if I get involved. I mean, that's what it's about. And kids have it. Humans have it innately. So I think for me, it's about trying to just continually remind myself that I've got to peel off those layers of self-judgment and critique and fear to tap into what is already innately there, which is wonderment and creativity.
It's so hard, isn't it? I guess. So you got me thinking. So I wrote a book, Insightful Innovator, and the first chapter of it was The Mad Scientist. And my granddad used to call me this. He used to call me the mad scientist, and I used to have big, thick glasses. I had a lazy eye when I was a child, so I had these big glasses, and sometimes I'd have a patch on and whatever else. I had this imaginary.
I had a patch. I had a lazy eye. I feel you, bro.
This is it. And at some point, I had an imaginary friend as well. But anyway, but he used to give me, like, I used to go around to my families, my gran and my granddad, and be like, "Give me your junk, give me your rubbish." And I remember being looking at stuff and going, "Why are you throwing this away? Like, what could it be? What else could it be?" Like, wow, there's that. And just listening to you speak then, I'm like, finding that now as an adult is harder and harder. Yeah. And it shouldn't be, but it is.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, and that's actually why I specifically have spent the last half decade or more in very conservative, regulated industries like banking and healthcare, because it's, as you get an adult, as you just described, it's harder and harder to just have those wild and crazy ideas. Often those are the ideas that lead us to unexpected, beautiful solutions to things. And regulated industries, even more so, have this unintended consequence of, our health and our wealth and our wisdom. So education, financial services, and healthcare, those are arguably humanity's most precious resources, our health, our wealth, and our kids' future. And because they're so precious, we've regulated the heck out of those spaces to make sure that we don't mess those spaces up. But what happens with that regulation and that mindset is you end up having the unintended consequence of really not having the pace of innovation that you see in other industries that take more thoughtful risks, that prototype and iterate new possibilities. And so I've always felt that those are the spaces that are really ripe for design innovation because of that. And, I know I can be a great designer in Silicon Valley. I know I can be a great designer in technology that has this like quick pace and is, a little bit more, optimistic about what can happen. But the real question for any designer is, can you be a great designer in the darkest place that doesn't get you, that doesn't understand creativity, that has a culture and a system that's meant to reject those mad scientists and rebels and folks? And so for me, the reason why I went into those spaces was to grow and to learn, and also to contribute. If design is a light, if creativity and innovation is a light, why take it to a bright space? Like, I never really wanted to work at Apple. I never wanted to work at Tesla or Airbnb or all these companies that are great at design, because they're already bright spaces. They've got a lot of cool stuff figured out with how to do this well. Like, let me take my light to the darkest place so I can have the biggest impact. And when you do that, you will quickly get rejected if you don't understand the environment you're in, if you don't speak the language of banking or healthcare, if you don't slow your roll, change your speedometer a little bit, and your odometer a little bit to say, we're going to take it easy. But like, I fully agree, man. That challenge of closing down to creative possibilities is something all adults face. And I think design allows you to safely unlock it, because design, unlike art, is an act of service, not an act of ego. And design allows you to not say, this is what I want. It's like, this is what the people we serve want. Like, can we as a business rally around a different approach? Because people don't get banking. Like, can we design apps, interfaces that help people connect to money in simple ways that, and so that it takes it away from you and takes you into a place of humility, which is even more powerful than the traditional mad scientist innovator.
It's fascinating this. So I'm currently working, I say currently, I'm due to leave in the next 4 weeks. I'm moving to Dubai.
No way.
Yeah, I know, wow. Right? But I work for currently a financial services, and it's fascinating. So I had a interview with my boss at the time, and she was a mad scientist. Like, she's one of them who's like, I don't get it, but I know how important it is, and I'm going to put my wings over you to protect you from doing it. And it was fascinating, because oftentimes I'm that position. So it's been a really nice one. And one of the big things I said to her when I joined was, what I'm here to learn is patience. Yeah. Because you're a slow moving oil tanker in the sea, and I'm used to working in speedboats. And so she left, and she's moved to Dubai, and then I've ended up having to go into a different manager now, and that manager doesn't get it.
Yeah.
But they don't want to get it, which is quite a fascinating one, because you go, oh, your organization is ripe for disruption. Like, it needs this. You brought me in for this, but then they bring you in and then they ask you to conform. And you're like, no, you brought me because I won't conform. There's a balance to be had. And it's a tricky one.
That's so key. Well, first of all, I found that in my life, next to, my foundational relationships of love and kids and core friends, really the most impactful relationship is the one you've got with your manager, with your boss, because you end up spending actually often more time with them than even partners. And so much of your day is with them, and so much of your 9 to 5 time. I never really worked 9 to 5. It's always been so different. But if you think about that Monday through Friday 9 to 5 zone, that time is really dominated by that relationship. How much trust is there? How much is that person and a servant leader invested in your growth? How much do they understand your unique talents and capabilities? Or how much are they just using their relationship as a political power, force to just get you to do stuff for them? And, we have this phrase called servant leadership, but in my experience, particularly in the worlds of banking and healthcare, it's very hierarchical. And so having both, well, first of all, a work culture that embraces the kind of values that you as a professional espouse is so key. And there's some companies I just don't want to work for because there's just not going to be that alignment. And then having within that company a sponsor, a cheerleader, a supporter, a therapist, someone who really you end up going deep with. It's so precious. I've had, several incredible bosses in my career, like Dr. Regina Dugan, who used to run DARPA. She was my boss at Google. She was incredible. Like, just her intelligence, her passion, her personal support. She was just incredible. Zaka Mian, who is now the head of transformation and tech at John Lewis. He was the guy that brought me into Lloyd's Bank, brought me over to the UK 5 years ago. We are exactly the opposite personalities, but so complementary. And he always believed in the strategic power of design. So those kind of precious relationships really define your work life.
Yeah.
And when it's not right, everything's wrong. And, you come home drained and you don't wake up eager to jump in.
Yeah.
And so I've stopped really thinking about companies I want to work for or roles I want to have. And more I just think about what relationships do I want to invest and go deep in, and who is going to help me learn and grow and really support me. It's a part of me leaving the corporate world. I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit, but for the first time in the last 2 months, I've left the whole notion of working for one company at a time. And I'm now free to work with anybody. And I want to work for a dozen or more companies in 2024 to think about design acceleration in a new way. That gives me the opportunity to forge not just like one boss at a time, but I can have 12. And I can be thoughtful about picking and choosing the right kind of relationships that allow me to grow, me to serve, me to have impact. And that's a beautiful thing. It's very freeing.
There's a trait what I've noticed with a lot of people who I have on this show. And I am a firm believer of you need to get out of your bubble. But you need people in your bubble as well, people who are like you and who get the same tension and the same human tension. And there's something which I really noticed time and time again is what they value. So it's not always money. It's always development. It's always growth.
Absolutely.
And it's funny, when you close your eyes and you think about a good leader, you can spot out. I do this activity where I'm like, I call it your wows and cows, right? Close your eyes and write down all them cow moments you hate, all the things, the bugs, what you hate in your day. Yeah, and then write all the wow moments.
Yeah, cool.
And you can do that with your leaders, and you go, oh, you can see on your hand who is really good. And when you needle in and sit with that, you go, they kind of spoiled me in a way, because I know what real good looks like now. I know what the expectation is. And it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one for sure.
Well, I think that all goes back to values. What do you value?
Yeah.
What are your deepest held beliefs? What are the values and deepest held beliefs of the organizations, teams, companies you want to work for? That really defines everything. Simon Sinek's Start With Why philosophy is so key. We often gloss over that. We get right into the tactics of projects and impact, and particularly with design and tech, we get really fascinated by the shiny objects of AI and data analytics and Figma prototyping or whatever it is, and we forget that those are all just tools in service of this other thing called purpose. And your purpose is all based on your values. And what I've really found is, to your point about diversity, like a lot of my bosses haven't been like me. In fact, some of my best bosses have not been anything like me. And actually, some of my best partnerships have been with people that are just, you would think, would not get along with the chief design officer. Like at Lloyd's, one of the most powerful partnerships I had was with the head of risk and audit. And, I didn't realize this coming into Lloyd's, but then as soon as I'm an executive in the executive committee, I have to have a risk committee like everyone else, like the CTO, the chief data officer, the chief design officer. I have a risk committee. And at first I was like, risk committee, like that's going to be fun. That's not going to be my best meeting of the week. And it turns out that committee allowed me to learn the language of the bank. I mean, finance is really a kind of a conceptual thing. It's really about trust at the end of the day, and that trust that is, managed through a risk and strategy lens. And then once I learned the language of the bank, we were able to work with both risk and with audit to basically speak that language to say, hey, from a design perspective, we don't have enough design researchers, for example, right? And design researchers help us get into the heads, hearts, and minds of the people who we're designing for, these, consumers or commercial bankers, whoever our software apps were for. And we end up building a lot of stuff and apps without their input. That's a risk, that we waste valuable development time, that we risk creating things that people don't understand, that we risk creating more complexity when actually we could do things differently. And so we wrote this risk opinion, and it really helped to ultimately bring a little bit more investment to our design research capability and elevate it. And that's not because I was talking to someone else who really got design. It was like I talked to someone else who was really excited about doing the right thing. Talked to someone else who's really excited and appreciative of the different perspective that I brought. And together we created something that neither of us independently could have created, which was this maturity of design through both the language of design and risk. Like, I love those relationships because that opposite, diverse perspectives is what is the spark of truth. The clash of flint and steel is what creates the spark of truth. And I love that kind of dynamic.
It's fascinating. I introduced with my team. So I was like, look, team, it's great that we can do these things, but I was like, we need to do, so I call it a BRAD: benefits, risks, assumptions, dependencies. Like
benefits, risk, assumption, dependencies. Yeah. Okay, cool.
I'm like, if you're going to go with something big, whether it's...
Or drab.
Drab.
Maybe that was good branding.
Yeah, nice. That could work, yeah. That's a better one. But I was like, look, and so I think I'm a firm believer of constraints bring creativity. I love a bit of constraint. But I think we could probably needle on this all day. But I guess I want to ask you the dice question, what we came to earlier.
Yeah.
So have you done anything lately worth remembering?
Yeah. Well, the thing that comes to mind, because I think it's just top of mind, is in the last 2 months, I made this decision to go independent, to launch my own chief design advisory stretch of my career. And there are terms for this, right? There's words like a fractional executive or a portfolio career. And these are really just fancy terms that the gig economy for more senior leaders. And what that really just means is, instead of just, working for one company at a time, you have the independence and the flexibility to do a lot of different things. So in my portfolio, I've got these 9 things I'm doing. I won't go through the whole laundry list, but it ranges from, being an author and writing a book, and then taking the content from that book, uplifting design, and turning it into a dozen master classes, which I've actually already given at the Royal College of Art, and I had it filmed, and those will be coming out starting next month. I'm also a speaker. So the Washington Speakers Bureau is now representing me, and they're bringing me into these conversations where I'm able to, connect with a number of folks that are interested in design and innovation. And flying out to Denver next week for one of those gigs. And then also just helping to coach and mentor the next generation of design leaders. So vice presidents of design who someday want to be a chief design officer, but don't know exactly the path to get there, or current chief design officers who are lonely because they are the most senior design leader at a company and they've got nobody to talk to or nobody to mentor them. So I would love to give those leaders some connection that I never really had when I was a chief design officer. And then finally, I'm doing some advisory work where I'm working with CEOs or members of their leadership team who really believe in the strategic value of design, and spending anywhere from, several weeks to, 10 weeks out of the year to go deep with them. Now that for me has been scary, because even though I started my career right out of university in agencies, from the first 5 or 6 years of my career, I worked in creative studios and agencies. As soon as I had 2 kids, and then the third was on the way, I was really attracted to Microsoft, because it was a place that desperately needed design back in the O's. So design at Microsoft has flourished in a whole new way under Satya Nadella, and they have their first proper VPs of design and CVPs. At the time, I had hit the ceiling of director in design at Microsoft. But I think from a life perspective, I really wanted to join the client side and have a little bit more regularity to this thing called work and life. And when juggling the lifestyle of a parent with 3 kids, that was really appealing. And I've really, in some ways, been super comfortable doing
Continue now.
Okay. Well, so the thing that I think I've done that's worth remembering, at least for me, is I've had the courage to break away from the relative security of what it means to work for one company, a regular paycheck, all those benefits, not having to hustle all the time to find out where I'm going to make my next, project or revenue, and just have the belief in myself that if I get out there and I talk about what I want to work on and the kind of relationships I want to establish when it comes to design leadership, that the finances and the logistics and all the benefits and all that'll sort itself out. Let me really focus on where I can have impact. So I think it's worth remembering because A, it was really hard for me to do. B, other design executives who have been thinking about taking this path, 4 or 5 design executives have said, damn, this is so cool. Like, I really want to do that. And, and then the other reason it's worth remembering is like, I wrote a book, a 209-page book. I wrote the core of it in 2 weeks, and I'm still in the final editing right now. I wouldn't have written that book, which distills 25 years of design leadership into, something that can be taken not just by design leaders, but by anybody who wants to uplift design. And I just think that's worth remembering because as I approach 50 and recognizing that life is short, let's do work that's meaningful, that's purposeful, that aligns with what we want to do. And whether my journey now is going to generate stuff that's as memorable as, Project Aura at Google or Hotmail or Surface or the Walmart redesign or the Hey Moto, Hey Google thing, I don't have anything to prove really in terms of portfolio. What I really want to do is just work in the spaces where I can have impact in a more powerful way. So that's worth remembering.
Nice. It's I want to actually touch on the book a little bit. And I'm going to reflect on my experience and tell me if it's the same, because I don't really know lots and lots of authors who have done design and kind of bringing multiple different angles to design. So when I was doing my book, it started off as one big book, and then I was like, holy shit, this is too much for one big book. So then I ended up having to create 3. I created Insightful Innovator, Experience Engineer, and Culture Crafter. And my world is predominantly either creating more immersive experiences, be it in physical, or creating employee experience, right? I don't really link too much to customer. I do passively, but
a little bit.
But the hardest thing what I found with writing my book was what stays in and what comes out. Like, it was so hard. How have you found that? In fact, tell me a little bit about your book first, and then the challenge of it.
Well, we'll see how good it is. I don't even know. I'm a first-time author. I've never really done this before. It's an experiment. But, what was interesting for me was I had a deadline, which forced me to just get into my focus zone. So what ended up happening is, I knew I was taking this break. I wanted to collect my thoughts from the last 25 years of design practice into something that, my initial thought was, the initial working title was Everything I Wish I Knew Before I Became a Chief Design Officer. And that was kind of so it was like, if I can leave any kind of legacy, it's like, here's stuff that if I had been told before I went on this path, I would have been able to avoid a lot of pain and heartache and accelerated more. So I wrote chapter 1, and then I had the opportunity to give a guest lecture at the London School of Economics to one of their executive master's programs in social impact and behavioral economics. And it was like a 4-hour lecture. And so I was like, well, let me test out what I've just written about and also the framework of the book. So I knew that from the beginning, I knew the framework of the book was going to be values, vision, strategy, tactics. And they would progress in that way, because that was the playbook that I've used to elevate design. When I have gone into a new company and taken on the challenge of leading all of design, there's just a whole bundle of tactics, projects, initiatives, organizational models and things. And if you ask any one of those designers or any of their stakeholders, it's like, hey, what's our design strategy? Like, what's this project in service of? They're like, well, what do you mean? There's no design strategy. We just have to ship this feature by this date, usually, right? And so what I really started to believe was that you can't just have design is often thought of as a tactical, decorative, superficial force that comes at the end of the process, that business and product strategy people figure out what you do and like, oh, I'll bring a designer in because they'll make it look pretty or good or whatever. That's usually, unfortunately, how design is misused. And to me, the best value design is, making stuff look amazing, because designers can do that too. But to understand who is it that we're designing for, what are their needs, what is their life, how can we help them, how can we serve them? Because ultimately the purpose of business is to serve society. If you're a business and you're not, meeting a need of somebody, you're going out of business, right? And so really the heart of business is design, but because we become so left brains, we end up forgetting that the soul of business is design. So I don't know, man. I just feel like bringing that back into the book, and then starting with courage to say it starts with values. Your values are what, your deepest held beliefs. Those values then get translated into vision, which is a fancy term that really just means, what future are you excited about? Danny, when you think about what the future could be like, what do you imagine could happen? That's vision. Yeah. And then your strategy is, what is my plan to create that vision, that future that I love? And then your tactics are then used as the power tools to work that strategy. So I knew the framework. And then I got so much feedback from this London School of Economics class of just how transformative it was, because many of these economics students hadn't really been exposed to design or modern design, strategic design. And then I was at the Royal College of Art Master's Show, and I told one of the professors there about what I was doing, and I wanted to write a book, and then I wanted to do master classes based on these 12 chapters following that framework. And they said, oh, well, what are you doing in 2 weeks? Because we've got a programming gap. And I was like, shit, like, I don't know. Like, he's like, do you want to come in and do your 3 days of master classes, 12 hours of instruction? I was like, okay. And so then I sat on the bed with the Royal College of Art hoodie that I bought from the gift shop to just put myself in the persona of the master's students I was about to teach to. And I wrote the whole book, a chapter a day. I was focused, and every chapter had a case study, principles, a method, all of that. And then I wrote the book, and then I had 4 days to turn that into masterclass, like, lectures, curriculum. And I had a deadline. And so that forced me to get into a place of creativity. So constraints, right? Constraints breed creativity. I had some massive constraints. And not only that, but I hired a filmmaker to come to film me for those 3 days of the master classes. I had never been an author. I had never been a lecturer. I had no idea if I'd be any good. I was feeling nervous and scared and vulnerable, and I was sweating, and it was rough. But I was like, let me hire a filmmaker to capture me in 2 camera angles, 4K, whatever, all that good audio, as a signal to my brain that I better be good enough for these students. Yeah. And what I have to say is worth it. And we did. And so I kind of created the conditions, and some might say that's ego, but for me, it was really actually dealing with my worst fears and vulnerability and saying, you know what, I have to believe that I have something valuable to these folks. And if it's valuable, it's something that I should capture. So anyway, that was my process. And at the end of the day, I used the metaphor because my fiance is a private chef, and she has introduced me to the world of culinary arts. And I learned about chef tasting menus. And chef tasting menus are cool because it's just a tiny little, delicacy, a snapshot of a wider set of cuisine. And so I said, these 12 chapters, these 12 methods, it's like a chef's tasting menu from the chief design office. This isn't everything. Every chapter could be a book. There could be 12 volumes if I went deep into each area. I said, so this is book number 1. I plan to write a book a year if I can. And I don't know if I'll publish it every year, but I want to get into that zone and start, going deeper into areas where there's interest or where I feel like I have more to say. So I just constrained myself. I said, Danny, I'm not going to be able to tell it all. Let me just be content with what I got. Here's a framework. Here's a deadline. Go. Yeah. So that's the book. You can tell me if it's good or not. I don't know. And if it's not good, at least you can use it as a cure for insomnia. Those nights when you have a hard time falling asleep.
I have a hard time to believe it will not be a good look. The simple fact that you used the analogy of chefs, I'm a big fan of kind of gastronomics, and that I'm looking at how the sense of smell and taste can play with you kind of hippocampus and pull stories. So yeah, like I'm all in. Sold straight away. How did you find the course? So I guess it's an interesting one. The book, when I was writing my book, it was like there's elements of it where I was like, oh, I thought I knew this, and actually after writing through it and kneeling through my own thinking, I'm like, oh, there's a blind spot in my thinking, and I was like, okay, let me go and validate this, go and validate that. And I guess I haven't done a course, but I would like to. What's the one big, I guess, tip you could give to someone who's thinking of doing a course?
Oh, it's interesting. Well, I don't know about you, but this is to that point earlier about healthcare, banking, and education all being ripe for disruption. I think education is such a broken system, first of all. So I don't think about this thing called a course comes actually from an educational model that comes out of the Industrial Revolution, right? Where you manufacture this thing called students or knowledge. And that, the way to manufacture, a productive human is to put them down the assembly line of knowledge. And here's math, and here's reading, and here's, politics 101 or whatever it is you're studying. And then we test you like you would test a product going down an assembly line. Like, did you absorb this knowledge? My view of human capacity is that, of course, we need a certain level of literacy and numeracy and basic educational skills for sure. But I think the reality of humans is that we are beautifully diverse, nuanced, and deep and unique. And each one of us has a slightly different set of natural gifts and talents and interests and abilities. And the education process should not be about stuffing cubes of, coursework and knowledge into us and seeing if you got it. I think education should be a process of uncovering the unique gems that each one of us has and then applying those to having impact in the world for good. I mean, that's really what education should be. So when I thought about doing these courses, I thought about all the boring lectures I had to sit through in university and in college. I thought about the professors that basically just had massive amounts of PowerPoint slides where you didn't really even need them. You could just read their slides, right? And I thought about, how do I learn? So every chapter of the book, and therefore every one of the master classes or courses I gave, it started out with a creative activity that reoriented your mind around the principle. Nice. Every chapter began with a principle as well. Every course began with a principle. So to talk about the why, here's why we're talking about this today. And then every chapter had a case study. So here's an example from my practice. And to your point, I have so many blind spots. There's so many industries I don't know about. For example, I had a book about measurement and I called it Prescience, Pre-Science, right? Because designers often have intuition that goes a little bit beyond the pure scientific method, but actually designers have to get better also at measuring. So in that measurement section, we're at the beginning of design teams and leaders being able to really measure the ROI and the business impact of design. And I recognize that what I'm about to offer, and I use the example in that chapter for Walmart, Walmart.com, and how we ended up doubling conversion and how we, used NPS-X, which is our own thing of NPS, which is a trailing measure. And I was like, there's probably a million other ways to do this. And I'm sure other people that are deep into design measurement and analytics would just, cut the heck out of this thing and say, you have no idea what you're talking about. But the way I got through it, Danny, was just by saying, well, here's my experience. Here's my case study. Here's what I've done. I'm really happy to learn from others. And it's just a contribution. I'm not trying to educate you in this course on the way, because my view of knowledge is not, it's a thing that's static that you need to learn, but that knowledge is a way of uncovering your best. So that was how I freed myself from those challenges.
It's so true though, right? Even when I look at my design process, I'm like, if you're still using this process in 3 years' time, you've cocked up because you haven't evolved it. You haven't tested it and gone, there's a gap here, let me evolve, let me build. And I think sometimes we do that with frameworks and processes. It's like, this is the line in the sand. I'm like, no, everything's a remix. You should be taking this and remixing it and turn it into something what's specific, personalized for you and yours.
Well, actually, just really quickly on that point, that was the one thing that I really cocked up, to use your language, in this, because I had a filmmaker and because I knew that I wanted to take these master classes and share those with the world in another format, because some people like books, some people like, little videos, masterclass things. I ended up creating an experience that was not as optimal for the actual people that experienced it, because if I didn't have the filming of it, I think there would have been a lot more interactive elements. There would have been a lot more discussion. So I ended up speaking a lot more than I listened, or that there was participation. And so that was a bit of a learning. I can't really do filmed masterclasses and in-person lectures in a way that both of those ultimate audiences, one is a future scaled internet audience, and one is like, here's the 27 people in front of me now, get equal benefit. And I learned from that though. And actually, as the master classes went on, I allowed for more discussion. I allowed for a little bit more participation. And so, but I didn't get it right. And, but that's okay. I learned.
But that's the value of it though, right? Like from your own growth and your development, like that's so valuable. And I think it's a fascinating one. The one thing I don't get from you, Dan, is any ego. Like the fact that you will share, I learned from this. It's like, it feels like there's something in, maybe not in, I don't necessarily see it in my team, but there's something around people just not going, it's an experiment. Whether it works or not, the value comes from what we learn from it. It's not every experiment's got to be successful. And I think there's something around, this is probably a little bit basic for our conversation, but like the mindset of a good designer, a good problem solver, a good innovator, there's a touch of ego because you've got to want to challenge it. Like I always talk about having a healthy disrespect of certain things. But we also are humble enough to go, didn't get it right first time around. And that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. I want to kind of get us onto your design work, because I think I came across you before, but you did a talk at Nudgestock, I think, remember, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and I had Rory on just today actually, which was
cool.
which was a great time. But I want to think about you working with these big organizations, and you've kind of already touched upon it a little bit. How have you managed to link like your design principles or your design values with the organizational values? Because that seems to be, when I've spoke to people in the past, it seems like there's a tension there sometimes of how to align them maybe. Or have you not found that?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I recognize that is often the case, particularly with designers and design teams in companies that are, well, at a minimum, don't really understand exactly the strategic power of design, but at a maximum are afraid of the wild, crazy, creative things that design brings that maybe could destabilize everything, right? But here's the thing. For the last 5 years, I've been a chief design officer, right? Most recently at the Fortune 5, United Health Group, fifth largest company in the world. Before that, the FTSE 19, Lloyd's Banking Group, massive in the UK, right? And when you play a role that is a peer to a chief technology officer or a chief marketing officer or a chief, people officer, you start to recognize an accountability for design that goes way beyond just designing products or apps or things, right? And not just hiring the team, but you're kind of responsible, like a chief technology officer at a company is responsible for the practice of technology at the entire institution. He or she is responsible for attracting incredible talent and the strategic technical roadmap and architectures to modernize. And often chief design officers initially are just thought of saying like, oh, well, you're here to help make our products better. I mean, at that level, you're really thinking about culture. And so let me give you just two examples of where it's been really powerful, because to my earlier statement that the purpose of business is to serve society. If that's true, then design at any company or organization is the secret function or perspective that can unlock a company's deepest purpose, because design, unlike art, is selfless. It's focused on the lives, the needs, the hopes and dreams of the people you serve. So let me give you an example. Lloyd's Banking Group, their purpose when I joined was articulated as helping Britain prosper. Simple 3-word thing. And in some ways that's really inspiring because prosperity feels like this flourishing kind of thing. In some ways super awkward because no one ever uses the word prosperity. Like, hey, Danny, you have a prosperous week? It's just, but, so as a design team, we had these design researchers, we had design labs, and what we did is we just did a very simple activity where we asked the people that we serve, we recruited folks, brought them into our user testing labs and, had conversations with people. And we just asked them the question, what does prosperity mean to you? If everything that we do is about prosperity, we should probably understand what that means. And probably what banking leaders think prosperity is maybe isn't exactly how ordinary folks or business owners think about prosperity. And to save you a story of, all the in-depth insights we have, you can imagine the bottom line there is that the way people describe prosperity is not the language of banking. It's not accounts and amounts. It's not, it's really about two things. It's about relationships and it's about experiences or milestones. So one example, let me give you in the US, we have this thing called a 529 account. It's a tax advantaged college savings thing. So I could save up for very expensive US college fees without having to pay taxes in a crazy way. So from a banking perspective, they would think of that as this 529 account. For me, I don't really care about that. This is my daughter, Rue, a person, a relationship. And it's my daughter, Rue, graduating from university without the crippling debt that I had when I went to Tufts University. Milestone or experience, right? It's relationship and a milestone. And if we can start to speak to people in a language of prosperity that they understand, we're going to be even more successful as a bank in that way. And so anyway, so that was one thing. Another example at United Health Group is one of their 5 values was compassion. And compassion is a beautiful value in the world of healthcare, first of all, because we had our whole network of clinics and doctors, and we had health insurance plans that are meant to really come to people in their most difficult moments of life when it came to their health. And design is a force that can show a new level of compassion. Because when you take human-centered design practices and design thinking, when you iterate based on design research and you prototype and you validate and test with people, there's nothing that makes you more compassionate as a business or tech or product leader than sitting in a usability test or some other design research activity and seeing your ideas wildly fail because people have no idea what the heck you're talking about. And so many businesses make top-down decisions based on whoever's paid the most and is guessing. And so we showed, and so we created these workshops called Compassion by Design. And these were 1 week-long workshops that brought in business and tech and product leaders to get out into the field, to actually observe and research like a designer, and then to actually prototype and test and bring people back in and to experience those, and then to get feedback and to iterate. And so anyway, long story short, we ended up creating these cultural forces where design was not only, playing nice with the culture or with but that design held the secret insights that would unlock the very purpose and values and vision of the company. And to me, that is where you take what is an apparent friction, but then turn it into, something really beautiful.
I love this. You've got me thinking, oh man, this should have been a 4-hour podcast. You got me thinking about something. So I like talking about taking the insights and splitting them, right? You've got the mundane insights, you've got the magical ones. And actually, the magical ones only really come when you sweat the insights, when you really get to the human tension. There's simple things, I guess, in a typical employee experience lens. You've got, what does day one look like? Oh, well, we should have a laptop on day one. Well, that's a mundane insight. Of course you should have a laptop on day one. But actually, why? Why? The typical 5 whys or whatever.
Yes.
I really get under there.
That's part of my book.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, then you get to the real reason, the magical insights, what I'd help you identify the moments of opportunity. And I took a whole long, maybe 20 people to the Winter Wonderland in London, okay? But I made them go in a day just to see it as it is, which was balls there. And I was kind of saying, like, Winter Wonderland, you have 2 different experiences. You go at night and you go at day, you see 2 different things. And when you go at day, you see the flaws. You see the realness. You see the fact that the rides are tipping up a little bit when they're going round. And like, there's something about the exposure of it. And I remember coming away thinking, I'm a huge fan of immersion.
Yes.
Get in there.
Yeah.
Go and live with someone for a week and understand what it's like. Like, really get in there. I was designing an EVP for a large white goods company. I can't say who. They do vacuums. And I was like, we're going to go around to the house from 6:30 in the morning, and we're going to watch what it's like getting the children ready for school, the mad dash, and how we've got to get to work, and how we can't get coffee, and all this good stuff. I was like, you're going to identify the moments of opportunity at that point.
Absolutely.
And I just love that what you just said there. It's just, it's using that insight and then, but more so bringing them people to see it and feel it is like, there's something rich. And I honestly believe it's still so much unutilized. And I think it's just down to
so unutilized. Yeah. Well, if again, going back to this core belief that the purpose of business is to serve society, and I know a lot of people will bristle at that. They'll be like, well, so many businesses, they make money from, not serving people in society. And actually you can see a lot of examples of short-termism and looking at, near-term quarterly profits and businesses making really bad decisions when it comes to the people they serve and all that. But over the long term, right? What I'm talking about is over the long term, ultimately, companies only flourish if they're serving, if they're meeting the needs. If that's true, then we have these really regimented notions of, well, we have these employees, and then we have these products and services, and then we have these consumers. And if you look at the language of how we describe the people we serve, you'll start to realize how truly dehumanizing it is. Like, think about the word user. We use the word user all the time. Usability, user study. There's only a couple of industries that use that word. Edward Tufte talks about this. The illicit drug industry uses that space, and software development. And it's the thing about it is, well, while it's accurate, right? We're thinking about someone using our software. We forget very quickly that person who's using your feature, well, they're also a person with a life and hopes and dreams and relationships. Or think about consumer, like anybody who's got kids, would relate to this, as we talked about. Like, they see their kids as these creative forces that we talked about earlier. And the last thing that any parent would want to hope for their child is that someday, I want you to be a perfect consumer. I want you to acquire this list of objects, and then you'll be happy. Like, that is not what unleashes human potential, consuming the things that others create. Really, humans are creators, and we are change agents, and we have, agency. Or think about healthcare. We call people patients. If you look up synonyms for the word patient right now, you will see a list of stuff that's super depressing. Victim, invalid, sufferer, the ill. And there is no word in the English language that I know of that describes a human being by their potential to get and feel better when it comes to their health. Like in the world of sports, you have a word called athlete. Athlete is a word that's like, okay, you and I, you're like, I'm a coach, you're on my team, I'll call you an athlete because I believe that you can do better. Imagine if I didn't have that word athlete and the only way that I described you was the injured. Hey, injured, like it changes your mindset. Yeah. So we created a new word at United Health Group with the design team. We called people well-beings. And that simple mindset shift started to remind us that innovation doesn't come from the myth of the genius, whether it's the design genius or the tech genius. Innovation comes from the humble act of listening closely to the people that you serve and acting quickly to responding to what they need. And that changes the mindset. And that's where I think more and more companies are going to wake up to the disruptive power of true design in understanding the lives of people.
Yes. I'm all for this fight, Dan. I'm all for this fight. I won't be mindful of your time, so I've got a couple more questions and then I'll let you go, because it is Friday for the people who will listen to this eventually. And thank you for coming on a Friday night.
Of course.
I want you've led teams. You've led lots and lots of teams. And there's a couple of differences when I think about the teams I've led. There's some who are hungry. They have the appetite. They want everything. They want your knowledge and they want to learn it, and I love that. But there's something around not all teams have people like that. How, for me, when I think about teams, I think about creativity, connection, and conflict. And I use conflict. I know conflict has this real negative connotation, but I'm like, no, it's a good thing.
Conflict's great. Yeah.
How do you, in the past, how do you level up your teams, I guess, to kind of create that safe space for something or whatever you like to add into it, like for it to happen?
Man, we could have a whole couple of podcasts on that, couldn't we? I mean, there's so many things there. Well, first of all, let me just recognize the highest level that the traditional forms of leadership and management are ill-equipped to really unleash the capacity of people when it comes to mentorship and growth and all of that. And the traditional notions of leadership actually kind of also come from that Industrial Revolution notion of repeatable manufacture, right? And there's hierarchy and or the military and there's the structure. And so I think the first thing is as I've become more and more senior, I've tried to become less and less of an asshole. I mean, I've never really been a real asshole, but like, I remember when I was in my 20s at Microsoft, and so many of the VPs that I interacted with, they were just such a-holes, they were so stressed out and they weren't kind and they were dictatorial and they used that hierarchy, in abusive ways sometimes. And I was like, if I ever get to be a VP, I'm going to be a good one. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be compassionate. So like one example, my first day at Lloyd's, we got all day executive meetings in 25 Gresham Street, the executive floor. And then after those meetings, we go to my office. And I had a corner office, one of the highest floors where, the chief executives sit. And as we're going there, I'm like, well, are the designers here? I was like, no, there's no designers in this building. I was like, oh, where are the designers? They're like, oh, well, probably the biggest group here in London is across the Barbican in Chiswell Street. That's kind of the tech and innovation space. And I was like, can you just take me there? And they were like, okay, well, we're having IT come and they're going to help you with your Mac and, whatever, because that was weird, right, for the bank too. So we walked through the Barbican, literally through this kind of art center, through the city of London, from headquarters to Chiswell Street. And I walk in and the designers are like tucked away in like the basement floor, like, and like kind of out of visibility as well. So they didn't have the best spot in that place. And as I walk in, it's kind of towards the end of the day. There's not a lot of people there. I'm brand new. People don't know who I am. And I see like all the like window desks around the edge are taken by the directors and the senior people. And then there's like this one little spot of contractor desks that was free. And I was like, can I just sit here? And the people around were like, yeah, that's cool. This is where, the temporary folks sit. So I was like, great. I sat down. IT person took like an hour just to get my Mac working because it was like weird. Got my Mac working. And then I send my first email to the team. I'm like, hey team, I'm Dan. I have the privilege of being your chief design officer and supporting and representing you. I'm going to be sitting out of the contractor desks in the design studio on Chiswell Street. You can reach out to me anytime. If you have any questions, just come on by. And then I asked them a question. What are your deepest values? If you were creating an agency, what agency would you create? What would it be like? And in that moment, I just, people were shocked because first of all, I'm in the UK and there's a much different view of hierarchy, I think here, particularly in British banking than in the US and Silicon Valley where CEOs wear hoodies and they're chill, But then the other thing was my job literally was to support and elevate the designers on the team. And by sitting in that place and rejecting the corner glass office that protected me from, distraction, it actually made me better equipped to understand what was happening, to overhear conversations, to be accessible, to get interrupted. Because the community that I'm meant to serve and to elevate and to uplift, how can you do that if you're cut off from them and if you're hierarchically looking down on them? And so really this idea of servant leadership, my whole leadership team started to work around that desk. And so anyway, so first of all, I think that's key. And then to your question about, well, how do you deal with those that are really ambitious versus those that just want to like maybe just kind of do one thing really well? I think there needs to be space for all of that. If you have personal values that align to the values of the team or the company you're working for, we have to be content with folks that maybe don't have the ambition, aptitude, or drive to just, career climb. Maybe we need designers, for example, who go really deep into typography and they just, they've maybe plateaued, but at a level that's really valuable where they really help us with iconography and our layout and whatever. Like it's okay to have a diversity of folks. And then I think also if you're really invested in the people on your team growing, you have to let them leave. You have to allow them to get outside. I mean, studies have shown this. People who stay at one company make a lot less money than people who actually move more frequently, because internal promotion cycles and all of that just don't actually compare. And actually, that's fine. Like, if you care about people, let them go. Let them grow. They'll come back to you, you know? And so anyway, that's my philosophy.
Nice. I love that. It's fascinating. The debate of, so I like to, when I talk about what I want with the future of my teams, I always talk about creating anti-fragile teams. Teams that grow from
anti-fragile.
Yeah, teams that grow from shock. And yeah, your team's going to have people who are T-shapers. I know it's an old analogy, but you're going to have people in there who are potential X-shaped people. When I talk about X-shape, I mean technology design, hybrid, and have leadership traits. Like, they're the future leaders. So I think there's a real interesting dynamic around people just wanting a team of one type of person, and actually going back to your point, like, actually no, it's worth having that real depth in that research or X or typography. Like, yeah, it's a fascinating debate, and I do love looking at team effectiveness and dynamics and kind of culture hacking. It's a weird hobby of mine.
By the way, I use the metaphor of the T-shaped, X-shaped, and I also talk about M and O-shaped folks in the book, about talking about organizational structures. And so many design teams are organized by department, you know, research and product design and prototyping. And it's a really dysfunctional way of organizing design, actually. And anyway, that's a whole other topic. But I love that you also have recognized the power of those shapes. Like, I'm an M shape. You know, I started with information architecture and interaction design. And then I really got into design research because it's such a super power for understanding people and accelerating design. And then I got into design management and design leadership. So, and I still practice all three of those, and that's okay. I'm an M-shaped person. Like, you don't have to be T-shaped, right? You can be X or M or S-shaped or Z-shaped or Z-shaped for your listeners here. But anyway, yeah, that's cool. I like that you've stumbled upon that as well.
It's fascinating. There's something as well around. I love the research bit. I love the immersion. I love if I put design into just two really oversimplified buckets. You got discovery and you got delivery. I film sit in the discovery part of it. But I think it's just I love design research mainly just because I'm nosy. Like, that's all it really is for me. I'm like, ooh, I like the human behavior. Like, what is it? I think.
Well, here's the thing. Like, for any company you've worked for, it's the success of that company or products and services is really about the experience of the people who use your products and services, whether those are employees or whether those are B2B or whether it's consumers. And this is where it's not just someone who's nosy, or it's not just like some innovative Silicon Valley thing. Like, I think more and more companies have to recognize and realize that, you know, there's a different, you know, here's the problem with design in the world today, the stereotype that people think designers are artists. I love artists. Artists are awesome. We need artists. John Maeda actually talks about this, and he's like, artists create questions to problems, right? If you're an artist and you're doing an installation about some provocative problem in the world and you want to create more questions, right? And it's really selfish. It's your personal, deep, creative expression as an artist to provoke and to, you know, raise questions. A designer, like an artist, has creativity, but a really successful designer works from that place of selflessness, where it's not about what I want from creativity. It's about, what do you need? And so John Maeda then says, if art is a question to a problem, design is a solution to a problem. And you can't understand solutions to problems if you don't understand the people whose problems you have in the first place and who need solutions. So I wouldn't separate design and discovery so harshly. Yes, that is that distinction. But I kind of feel like, in a modern sense, particularly with digital products, what happens when you've got a 2-week agile sprint? What happens when you release, you know, multiple times a week? How can you keep a steady pulse of human-centered understanding and inspiration and research fueling how you build, how you create, how you adapt, how you modify? And I think these notions where let me get those crazy designers in, they'll do a 3-month thing, they give us some creative ideas, and then we go build it, and it all falls apart. Like, that doesn't work. What I get excited about is where designers and developers and product and business people are working together in multidisciplinary little pods, and they're in this 1 to 2 week rhythm of like circling back to the lives of people, and then into like making, and then prototyping, and then kind of this corkscrew of innovation that never stops. So anyway, that's kind of, I love that you love design research, and I just wish more companies did it more regularly.
Yeah. We're going to have to do a part 2 on this, I'm sure. Tell me about the future of you, then, Dan. So obviously you've decided that's it. You're gonna fight a good fight and not just fix one person's problem, but fix many people's problems. Tell me about what is the future of Dan? Tell me about the company. Tell me everything.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much happening. Well, first of all, it's hard to keep track of it all myself because now I can do anything. I can work with anybody. I can spend more time speaking. I can spend more time writing. I can spend more time doing master classes. So for me, it's a little bit tough because my executive calendar over the last 20 years has been managed by my executive admin team. And I've had, like my rhythms were defined by those meetings. I don't have that anymore. So I've got my own schedule. But the thing that gets me most excited is to, like the cost of a chief design office. It's not cheap. Right. It ranges from between 2 to 8 million for just the people cost of a proper chief design office. So the chief design officer and their executive leadership team at the VP, SVP level, or director, I guess, in the UK level, you'd say here. And not a lot of companies have got an extra 2 to 10 million lying around to say, oh yeah, I'll bring in our first chief design officer and elevate design to, the same level as tech or product. So what I'm trying to propose is, if you hire me for 10 weeks, and that 10 weeks, either we can go deep in a quarter, an intensive quarter, or you get me a week a month, or you get me a day a week, whatever cadence you want, or just as needed. That then gives you essentially, a quarter of the time I would normally spend. And for me, that's about a 450,000 kind of target for that kind of engagement. And it allows me to keep a relatively small number of relationships and partners that I go deep. So I can only take on 3 of those a year. And I've already got 2 of those for 2024 lined up. And I've got 1 left, right? So I'm like having conversations with various places about what I could do. And what that does is it reduces the budget of companies to say, well, I've got a 16th of that 2 to 10 million budget, but I actually can spend a good amount of time. And I'm really, come in, audit what I'm doing, think about recruitment, talent, culture, organizational structure, model. And then in some cases, those advisories will lead to me helping to generate the next generation design leaders and say, well, ultimately, you do need a chief design officer who's permanent, right? And you can fire me, or you can move me to the board or somewhere else. So that's the core of my advisory work that will pay the bills for everything else. But the time that I love the most is I'm mentoring a dozen vice presidents who want to get to the CDO level. I'm doing it for free. Nice. My time is, I'm not charging for that. I'm asking them, if they get a CDO role, give me a third or whatever you think is a fair percentage of your signing bonus. Let's align incentives. I don't make money if you don't make money. And even when I do, you get to determine the amount. And then, giving talks. I gave over 100 talks in the last decade, and I never got paid for it. It was internal or external, and it was just a way to continue to develop thought leadership. But now I can do that with the Washington Speakers Bureau. And so, I'm flying out for this one, and Platon and Steve Wozniak and others are part of the Washington Speakers Bureau as well. And I can't believe I'm in the same crew, I know are near fate as much as they are, but it's super cool to be out there. And then the last thing I'll just share here, and there's so many more things, but I now can flexibly connect to a bunch of different networks and affiliations that I never had the time to connect in with before. So for example, I applied for and was accepted as a fellow to the RSA, the Royal Society of Arts, which is this group of 30,000 creatives and innovators and designers in the UK. And so now I'm a part of that crew. And now I have this community that, I no longer working for one company. So I'm not going into an office and have my leadership team, but now, so I'm a fellow at the RSA, and that's really cool. I am the next member of the Design Executive Council, the first international and fractional. We haven't announced that yet, but it'll get out, and eventually we'll announce that. And that keeps me connected to the kind of folks that have gone through similar experiences that I have as chief design officers. And then most importantly, I just announced today on LinkedIn, you saw this, that I am a creative catalyst, so a very senior leader at this next generation kind of creative agency force called NEOL. And NEOL is this network of several thousand of the world's most creative minds and talent across technology, design, strategy, product, who is thinking about how to have meaningful, worthy, sustainable impact in the world through businesses that are asking better questions, better design questions, not just, hey, can you make the icon for my app next week a little bit better? Or, but like really asking questions like, how do I approach new markets from a human-centered perspective? Or how do, and then also thinking about sustainability and diversity and inclusion in new ways. And so I'm one of just a couple of dozen of the most senior leaders over this network of thousands that is, as an executive, representing the capabilities of NEOL to companies that want to access that talent. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing that while I'm also doing advising. So these are complementary, and we're learning as we go. Like NEOL was just launched just a couple of months ago, and we're just getting formed. So it's a very, very exciting thing. Tim Brown is our chief evangelist. He was former CEO of IDEO, chairman of, IDEO as well. So we got some amazing minds and hearts there. So anyway, that's what I'm up to. That's a little sampling at least.
Oh, wow. Before I get into where people can find you and connect with you and stay up to date and follow and follow and find you. I asked you right at the start about the teacher and what you'd be when you grew up. And as you've clearly demonstrated through this whole podcast, Dan, you're always on a journey of development and growing up. If I was to ask you right now, Dan, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would your answer be?
Oh, I hope I never grow up is my answer. And I hope because if I grow up, that means I've stopped asking the question of what I could be, of what's my potential. So first of all, I hope I always ask that question, but I do hope I hope that my experiences and perspectives can be as valuable to a few folks in this next generation of creative leaders, whether they're in design or tech or anywhere, as some of the design leaders of the past have been for me. Like Dieter Rams has his 10 principles of good design, which have been so great, and so grounding to the design community. And you can look this up. Johnny Ive, one of the most famous design leaders in the world, former chief design officer at Apple, so much of his aesthetic and work came out of Dieter Rams' principles and kind of work. So when I wrote Uplifting Design, each one of the 12 chapters started with a principle of great design. So I have 12 principles of great design. Not to say that, my principles are better than Dieter Rams, but I'm, hoping that the collected wisdom of what I have to share may be inspirational to somebody. And that may help them as they take on the next challenge. And I don't know, I'm almost 50. I'm never going to retire. I'm always going to be working in some way. And maybe my work is going to be more thought leadership and writing and other kind of things as I grow older. But, my time of that kind of prime impact is moving into a place where I really hope that when I grow up, I will have the privilege to have my thoughts and perspectives and experiences accelerate the next generation of leaders to have even more impact. And one thing that I didn't focus enough on in my career was societal design and impact. And there are so many things that need addressing from an ethics and justice and societal lens, whether it's sustainability in the economy or whether it's thinking about access, education, race, etc., in industries that we try to serve and all the imbalances. Or whether it's just, what does life mean and how do we support people's lives that are more connected, more happy, more, joyful, more intertwined. So I think when I grow up, I will spend more time on making this thing called humanity a better place and inspiring people to bring that human-centered perspective to their works. That's what I want to do.
Nice. Perfectly put. Perfectly put. Dan, where can people find you, follow you? Where can they connect with you and let you know that they want to take up that one spot, but still outstanding?
Yeah, awesome. So the new place is Uplifting Design. So I have the domain upliftingdesign.com, but I also have the domain uplifting.design, which is even cooler. So if you go to Uplifting Design, you can see the ways you can connect with me. I've also just launched the ability for people to have a newsletter. I've never had a newsletter before, and I've now got my first one, I had 40 subscribers, and my second one, I now have 80 subscribers, and who knows, maybe I'll have 160 if that doubles again. But really excited to be able to share with that community the launch of the book when it comes out, the launch of the master classes, and ultimately I'm going to have my own app. You'll find it on Uplifting Design. And the whole Uplifting Design is the title of the book. And it's also the spirit of what I'm trying to do is work with individuals and organizations. I want to elevate the practice of design in its, deeper, more spiritual kind of human-centered sense. And that app is going to give people access to the master classes and all that. So Uplifting Design, that's where to find me. And I can't wait to hear what your subscribers have to say and push back and critique and amplify. I mean, so cool that we had a chance to have this conversation finally after years of, what'd you say, appropriate stalking?
Yeah, appropriate stalking.
No, it's been good.
I'm not even sure it was appropriate at a certain point. But yeah, Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. I found it to be humbling, enjoyable, and just an all-out conversation. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Of course, Danny. And as you transition to your next adventure into the desert, let me know. I'm always here for you and happy to do a part 2 if your viewers and readers and listeners feel like they need a bit more.
Awesome. Thanks for going on, Dan.